All right, welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris, and today I'm joined with Warren Carlyle. Hey, Warren.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Oh, man. Okay. So I know before we got going, I told you we just recorded Octopus. Warren, we just did orcas, and I told Angie, I was like, there's no way we're going to beat this species. And then the next week we did Octopus, and it wiped orca off the map.
You should say, or next week we did octopuses.
Octopuses. Yes.
we can already start with that. That's like the number one thing people are like, what's the correct plural? I mean, let's just get that out of the way.
I did, because I am a fan of Octonation. I do follow Octonation, and I knew that fact. So I did say that right up front of the podcast. But, you know, for our listeners, Warren has started the #1 Octopus fan club. That's what we're going to talk about. And it reaches more than just a quote unquote fan club. And throughout the interview, and if you listen to the podcast the other day, you kind of get an idea of what Octonation is about. Mm-hmm. Warren, I always like to start off these interviews. If you can just kind of give a background where you grew up, and we're going to kind of tell the story of how you started Octonation.
Sure. Yeah. Grew up in San Antonio, Texas, graduated from high school there. I actually was majoring in classical saxophone performance. So that was the thing that I was doing. And I got a full ride scholarship to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, and studied there for a bit. Wanted to go to a conservatory in Paris, France. And about 6 months in, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And for whatever reason, that paired with me feeling I need to be home, resulted in me dropping out, going home, and kind of switching up my major. She unfortunately ended up passing away. And so I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. After that, kind of I was having this crisis of like, who am I? Because I was 21 at the time. So from there, I really decided that I wanted to get out of San Antonio. I was there and constantly driving by my mom's house and just all the same people asking me how my mom was. And so kind of my way of moving from there was figuring out how I could get out of there. And so I'm a very strategic person. I've always been my whole entire life. And I went to a Barnes & Noble, actually, and was like, okay, I want to move to New York. I want to figure out what this fashion industry is like. I've always had an interest in celebrities and influencers. And there was a lot going on with social media at the time. And I was like, I wonder how people decide who is an influencer. I wonder how this whole entire thing works. And so I was like, I want to intern for a celebrity fashion photographer. And how would I do that? And so I go into Barnes & Noble and I start researching. And this is somebody with no background in fashion whatsoever, come from a family of 7. And started researching who were these people, where did they hang out, what did they do? Went to Instagram, started following them on Instagram to figure out kind of what they were doing, and then reached out and started sending direct messages. Hey, do you need an intern? This is what I could do for you. Hey, do you need an assistant? This is what I could do for you. And started sending out messages. Didn't really get anything back. And all during this time, I was also working out pretty hard because for whatever reason, I found like refuge in the gym. There's something about lifting heavy weight above your head that makes you forget about everything else.
Right.
And so finally one day I got a message back from this man named Kai Shi, and he was a celebrity fashion photographer, and he actually developed a lot of American personalities in Asian countries, and also needed an intern and an assistant. And so he gave me the job. I flew up there and started working with him, and really went from 0 to 100. I got thrown into the space and started out as his assistant, moved up to his studio manager, started managing his partnerships with global fashion brands like Mont Blanc, Todd Snyder, Uniqlo, and learned that space inside and out. Learned what made influencers, what they were looking for. I learned how fashion industries were essentially manufacturing relevancy. What I found out was the clothes that we wear on a daily basis, they're all made pretty much of the same things. And so what differentiated one brand from the next brand? And it was fascinating to me how, depending on who they chose to wear their clothes and what lifestyle they paired up with their name, it just completely changed the pricing structure of something that cost relatively the same amount to produce. And so I got really involved in that. And I remember when we were having a conversation with the CEO of a company one time, and he was talking about kind of this manufacturing relevancy in a marketplace. I thought, why am I not doing that with something that I love? You know, why am I not taking this intense interest or this intense passion that I have and moving it towards something that I feel strongly in? Because I realized at this point, it wasn't fashion for me.
Right.
I wasn't passionate. I was more fascinated with the motivations behind why all of these brands were in existence. And it's always been like that for me. I've always been driven to, what makes people do what they do. And so that's kind of where I ended up. And then I remember thinking, okay, well, I'm really interested in octopuses.
Right. Right. So when, at what age? Okay. So this is because your story fascinates me, and I've heard it a couple times because, I'm a follower of yours, and we'll get more into what you're doing now. But when did you first just like fall in love with the octopus? Because I'm not kidding you, Warren. I'm in love with the octopus too. They're crazy.
So I remember I was 7 years old, and we went to the aquarium when I was in school, and we walked by this, exhibit, and I saw this creature there, and I was curious. I started asking questions to the person that was leading our class, and I was the one that was there first and stayed behind to continue asking this person questions. And she was like, we gotta go. But I was like, how do they age? And, how do they poop? And how do they, all these questions I like, and for a lot of the questions, she kept saying, well, science really hasn't figured that out yet. And I thought, what do you mean science hasn't figured it out yet? How have they figured out everything about all these other animals and they can't figure out this one? And so that just kind of stuck with me. And I thought, as a kid, I was deeply obsessed with aliens and extraterrestrial life. Like that was me as a kid. I had alien posters. I had alien stickers. I mean, I just thought, it'd be so cool if aliens actually existed. And I guess when she kept saying science hasn't figured that out, like a part of my brain said, oh, it's because they're aliens. They're the most alien thing on Earth. And that kind of stuck with me. And since then I just, would research them. I did projects about them in school. I was really interested in like their neurology and just how their brain worked and how it was different than anything else. The way it was structured, the decentralized nervous system that they have. I mean, just a bunch of stuff. And I thought, why aren't more people interested in this animal? And I kind of didn't really do anything with it because I didn't really know what to do with it. I mean, you do what you know how to do with your passion, and you talk to people who will listen, and then you stop talking once it gets to a point where they're just like, okay, calm down,
Right.
And so it didn't really dawn on me until, I went through this experience after my mom passed away in the fashion industry that I was like, I can make people care about this animal through social media, through what all these other people have done with these major brands. I can take those same principles and I can apply it towards the animal that I love and manufacture relevancy, manufacture, sentiment for a creature that people don't have access to, readily access to, like inner city kids and just people that don't live on coastal areas, or, I can create this club or this fan club and teach people to fall in love with something that they don't have any proximity to. And so that's what I started with when I created Octonation.
Right. So can you kind of talk about the process of doing, like, you sit there, I mean, you're an innovator, you are a social media influencer, a major one. And, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, how do I create the world's largest octopus fan club, which Octonation is by far, by far. So can you describe that process?
Yeah. So it's essentially, I took a lot of what I learned from that fashion space where, when you look at brands and how they are able to create a lifestyle, with their brands, and they're able to, depending on who they interview or who they put their clothes on or who they talk about, all of a sudden those people that care about that specific person or that brand, all of a sudden are flocking to that brand. And so when I was creating Octonation, I told myself, who has the headspace to entertain a conversation about octopus right now? And who is currently catering to people who have this intense fascination and love for this animal? And so I started doing research. And like I mentioned, even back before I moved to New York and I was in Barnes and Noble, I've always been a researcher, a strategist. I'm not interested in doing something just by, playing small. I have to research and know that when I talk to people, it's not going to be on deaf ears, right? It's going to be with people that have the, I call it headspace to entertain a conversation. Because, and let me just go back really quickly, because when you're talking to somebody about something you're super passionate about, and they're kind of waiting till you finish speaking so they can be like, oh, that's really cool. It's cool that you're interested in that. Like, they don't really give you this feeling like they care or they know what you're talking about. And I feel like we owe it to ourselves in this busy environment, like this hyper disjointed environment that we live in nowadays, where people can choose what they watch on a daily basis. Everybody has a phone screen, and can choose where they spend their time. And so I said, I want to go after first the people that are currently serving this community. And so I just started doing research. I said, what podcasts out there that cater to people who would be interested in octopus? What thought leaders are currently in the space? What magazines currently cater to people who would have an affinity for octopus? And I started doing all this research, and I started finding there was a lot of places that catered, but there was not one main thing that was facilitating conversations on a daily basis that truly tapped into the essence of how cool this animal was and was promoting it in a way that people could share. And so I started, one of my first people that I connected with was Cy Montgomery, and she was the New York Times bestselling author of Soul of an Octopus. And people that know her in our community, they view her as like the Beyonce of octopus people. Like, she is like the Jane Goodall of octopus. She is we call them Cephalopods, because she is... If you say Cy Montgomery to an octopus person or somebody in the Octonation, they'd be like, oh my gosh, I love her. She changed my life. She changed, But if you say that to somebody who just doesn't have an affinity for the animal, they'd be like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And so I went after people, the super fans in the beginning, and I made sure that every single time I opened my mouth, it wasn't in front of somebody that didn't get it, at least when I initially started, because I didn't want to be in a position where somebody was like, oh, that's kind of silly, or that's dumb. And in the beginning, I found out very quickly that my family, my friends, nobody got it the way that I got it. And every single time I would talk about something exciting happening, they'd be like, cool, great, silly little fan club. And so I just made sure that every single time I wanted to confide in somebody, that I made sure that they were either they had written a book about the animal, or they were a scientist studying them, or they truly got what I was doing at Octonation. And so that's what I did. I started interviewing them. I started sharing their content. I started sharing their research findings, and in a way that I made sure that they were also sharing that content to their community as well. And in that way, after, hundreds and hundreds, I would say thousands of strategic collaborations with people that catered to an audience that loved this animal, after doing that strategically for about 3 years now, all of a sudden I started getting picked up by, Facebook headquarters and Ellen DeGeneres and Joe Rogan. But a lot of times people didn't see that I was moving, for years, collaborating with artists, underwater photographers, scientists, researchers, thought leaders in this space.
Right.
And now it's starting to pop, right? But there's a lot of strategy that went into getting it to this point.
Right. And it's just for our listeners, this is more than a fan club. I mean, what Octonation does, and again at the end, I'll make sure I direct people to your site, but it's not, I enjoy the videos. I enjoy the education and the conservation message that is promoted through this. It's so powerful. And you're talking 100,000 more people around the world. So I guess my next question is what's your goal with Octonation? Like, where are you taking the bus?
So our mission is to inspire conservation of the ocean by teaching the world about octopuses. And we do just that on a daily basis. Most people aren't aware that there are, when you think of an octopus, like the way that I bring it to people is I say, how there are a bunch of dog breeds, like you have a German Shepherd, you have a Boxer, you have all these different dog breeds. And I was like, do you know that there are way more species of octopuses than there are like dog breeds or anything like that? And people are like, really? I had no idea. I only thought there was like the one with the 8 arms. And, and so I start showing them, I start showing them the blanket octopus. I start showing them the sand octopus. And the lens at which I look at these animals is almost as if they have all these adaptive superpowers. And so I start explaining them. And I've taught in front of kids before, and I say, the sand octopus, can blow itself almost a foot underwater and secrete a mucus that reinforces the walls around it. And then it actually creates like this little ventilation shaft or this chimney to where it can breathe underground. So no predators can get it. And they're like, oh my, why are we just now learning about this? Yeah. And, when you talk about the blanket octopus that has 6-foot long trail of like this iridescent rainbow colored flesh, they're like, why are we just now learning about these like magnificent creatures? And I keep going and their eyes get bigger and bigger. And after we, finish the conversation, they typically, it raises their consciousness. They're just like, hey, I love this animal, and they start telling all their friends about it. And then they start saying things like, I don't want to use single-use plastics, or I'm done using straws. Or, I've had parents that messaged me and said, hey, I just want to let you know I was at a fast food restaurant and my daughter, who's 4, said, I know we're throwing this away, but where's it going? Because I don't want it to go, I don't want to go in the octopus's home, and so what we're doing is by sharing these animals and by telling their stories in a way that's super accessible and in a way that gets people excited, it makes them, I don't know, it just makes them stewards of the ocean. It makes them feel, it makes them feel like they're connected to something that they love, and then they want to protect it. So, I mean, that's what we're doing at Octonation. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing because, after doing this podcast for a year and a half and getting a global view of what's going on out there and interviewing people like you and researchers out in the field, and it's going to take a village. It's going to take an army. It's going to take the world together, us as a species coming together to make changes. So you're doing a huge part of that.
And I would say that another thing that I would say is that I'm more geared towards the sensitive empath individuals. I myself identify as very much an empath. And so I remember when I was in elementary school, that we couldn't have a pizza party like the other schools in the district because our recycling scores weren't up to par. Like we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing to recycle. And I remember thinking I remember asking teachers, how can we make it so that we get a pizza party next time? I mean, this is how they were doing it. And they were just like, well, because we're using these utensils, because we're using this, because, it just felt very disempowering. And I remember being in a situation where I thought, like, this doesn't feel good. And so what, the way when I was looking at Octonation and I was looking at a bunch of other organizations, not to poke at them or anything like that, but what I noticed that there was a lot of disempowering language that was happening. And for me, you don't want to start a conversation and tell somebody this is what you're doing wrong, and then think that you can inspire them after that. After they've already been beaten down and they feel like they're a horrible human being, all of a sudden they lose it. Some people get mad and they want to do something about it, but I think there's a bigger portion of the population that gets very nihilistic and thinks, well, if it's at this point and it's reached this level, and there's a lot of marketing going on where it's highly reactionary and they're saying, the world might as well be ending. And there's this very nihilistic viewpoint. I feel like what people are doing is they kind of go, well, If it's reached this point, then what can I do about it? I'm just one person.
Right.
And so with Octonation, how I wanted to position the organization is one that does not blame corporations. It does not, it's not there to serve that purpose. There's plenty of people that are just bashing on a daily basis what everybody is doing in their personal lives. And I was like, there needs to be something different. There needs to be a change with how we share information to people on a daily basis. And I don't want it to feel disempowering. I don't want there to be backhanded inspiration and then, oh, by the way, you're destroying the planet.
Yeah.
And so what I found with Octonation and just how we're positioning ourselves is we are for the like inspiration, education, really empowering people to make their decisions about what they're going to do. And we found that by inspiring them and giving them information about these animals, that they're more likely to change their habits based on a fascination or love they have for something versus saying, this is how messed up the world is, now change your habits. It's just a different kind of way to position a conversation. And I'm for those people, the ones that are kind of like completely
negative, just negative
right
messaging.
Yeah.
I think we could end the interview on that point right there. So that was, that is so true. And to be honest with you, like some of your mentoring for me, getting involved in social media has really pushed me to that messaging with what we do and calling our listeners conservation heroes. I mean, obviously you're a conservation hero. You're an obvious one. You've brought together this community to talk about these issues. But our listeners, if they just do some conservation on their own at home, like you said, that young 4-year-old refusing a straw, to me, that's a conservation hero. Also, there's a thing trending on Instagram called conservation optimism. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, it's horrible out there. The view around the globe is not good, but we can reverse these trends and we just have to act now. We can't wait 20 years. We have to do it now. So that's powerful, Warren. That's awesome. Can you kind of talk about what your fans do in Octonation? Kind of explain to our listeners.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different types of fans. I mean, we have artists, we have celebrity artists that, do murals, and we have, people that have octopus tattoos. We have the people that are researchers, like Donna Staff, Sarah McAnulty, who's a squid biologist, Cy Montgomery, who's a naturalist. I mean, there's just anybody who I felt has like a mild interest or passionate interest. I feel like at this point knows about Octonation, although we still have obviously a lot of work to do. But it's just Octonation is a place where they all come together. They share about the latest things that are happening. I know that I have a Google alert set up for anything cephalopod octopus related. So any news that happens, any new species that are found, any new papers that are written, the group finds out about it first. And so it's a place for all of us to talk about what's going on. And I would say that's what a lot of our members do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now I noticed you guys, and I volunteered, and I definitely want to do it here in Southern California, is meetups with fans.
What we realized with meetups, I did this campaign called Interview with an Octopus. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to various aquariums all over the world, and I wanted to interview the cephalopod researcher or the person in husbandry or that's keeping the octopus, and have a conversation on Facebook Live or Instagram Live with my audience so that they could interact, so that they could ask questions. There's, such a small percentage of people who have actually gone to an aquarium and seen an octopus. And so I thought this will be a way that people from their living room can be inspired or ask questions or be like, hey, we need to go do that, or we need to take our kids and we need to go see. And so I started that trend by just going and interviewing these researchers. And what I found was they had such an intense passion and love for the animal that it was so fun just to get them on camera, to make them feel like a celebrity for a day, or we call them celebrities, because they're inspiring
Right.
the next wave of people coming in to love this animal and to teach people about this animal. And so what I decided to do was to start having meetups at some of these places and get together with people from the nation to where they could ask questions, and they could just meet each other. And so, yeah, we've had meetups. We get together and talk everything cephalopod. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
And it's just fun.
I can't wait to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you get people in a room together talking about what they love, then you find they start talking about, okay, what problems, are there? What can we essentially do? Put us in action. How can we, what organizations does Octonation stand for? And then, I feel like once you get them to a place of, caring and you're entertaining their fascination, their passion, their interest for something, then and only then should you open a dialogue about, so, do you want to stop here, or would you be interested in? I mean, to me, it's like you can't make the assumption that because if they love something, then they should go do X, Y, Z. And I don't ever want to put people in a position where it's just like, I tell people I'm not like an octo evangelist. Like, I'm not going to be like, do this or do that, whatever. Right. It's really respecting, and I've always done this as a community building strategist for what I do for a living. Is I respect the attention span of the person that I'm talking to. I respect their headspace, and I respect the decisions that they make. And if they haven't gotten to a place where they're making those decisions to want to do a beach cleanup or want to do whatever, they'll eventually get there. I feel like. If they're not there yet, it's not my place to say, well, you obviously don't care. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do. They get to a point where it's just like, if you loved XYZ, then you would, do this. And it's like, no, that's like not, it's not respectful of them making their own decisions. And to me, with Octonation, it's always been, we want to empower people to get to a place where they're making a better decision by themselves, where it's not being forced upon them, where it feels weird, where they feel like they have to do something. We found that by just educating, by inspiring, by teaching them the facts, by sharing information in a way that's easy to understand and easy to share, that they're making the decisions by themselves to do things. And I feel like that's a more powerful position, and that's a more like there's more longevity and conservation that way than just saying, obviously that sea turtle video is powerful, the one with the straw in its nose, but there's equally amount of people that see that and immediately shut down. They get disempowered. They feel like they're horrible human beings, or they feel like whatever. And that marketing works for some organizations, but for Octo, it's not our ethos. It's not our mission and what we're doing as an organization. And that's what I wanted to create when I created Octonation, is just that environment, that sort of space.
No, it's very progressive thinking, to be honest with you. It's instead of guilting people like, well, if you don't do this, you're killing sea turtles. Yeah.
And then it's all this, and you see it. It's all this implied marketing, and that marketing gets millions and millions of views, but it's fleeting. It's a fleeting reaction that people have, and I feel like it's not what you could be doing, which is, I always tell people with Octonation and our content strategy, I want to empower people to be at Starbucks or to be at, a restaurant or to be anywhere they're at having a conversation, and I want them to be able to talk about an octopus fact. I want them to, like a giant cuttlefish can be as big as a small dog. Like, I want people to be able to have conversations that are more accessible and exciting to their kids and their friends. And that's what we do every single time we get a post. I ask myself, am I teaching something that somebody could easily talk about later on that day? Or say, hey, have you seen what was posted on Octonation today? They talked about, the blanket octopus. And did you know that the males are, 10,000 times smaller? Like, can you believe that? That's crazy.
Wow.
Like those,
I didn't know that.
Are the kind of, it's like, those are the types of conversations that I feel like we can facilitate between people. It's just providing them the words that they need. to talk about the thing that they're becoming fascinated in. And that's, science communication obviously isn't, I mean, there's a whole, genre of people that are trying to figure out how to make science more accessible. And I saw that there was a definite need for that too. And so I started thinking, okay, how would this animal excite me? Or how could I frame this to where, because a lot of it's, I mean, the same species that we've still discovered today. I'm still figuring out new ways to talk about it. Like, an octopus has a radula, which is like a cat's tongue almost. And so I'm always trying to find new ways to bring information to where people say, oh my, I had no idea. Did you know that an octopus, has a beak, and inside the beak, it has like this raspy like tongue like a cat? And if we can make information accessible like that, then all of a sudden you have people talking about it. There's widespread education that's happening between people, and not just after Octonation stops talking. And I feel like that is more important than shocking somebody and saying, look at all this trash, or look at all this garbage, look at, whatever, and disempowering people in order to feel like, wow, look at what we've done. And I feel like there's a place for that, but I feel like what I'm seeing with Octonation after doing this for 3.5 years, is that I get so many messages from parents and other people that are talking about volunteering more, or talking about having conversations with their friends and their family. Or, we don't tell people that they should stop eating octopus, but there's so many people who've just decided that they don't want to eat it anymore. And that's not something that we're pushing on people. These are decisions that people are making as a result of us educating them, not us saying, look at how horrible you are. If you actually cared, then you'd be doing this. And, right. So it's just that.
No, and I mean, it's a critical point too, because you talk about science communication, and that's what, like, in our podcast, we try to do. And like just last night, okay, we're recording Octopus, and I'm sure you know this fact, but they edit their RNA. Mm-hmm. How do I explain that to somebody that doesn't know genetics very well? You know? And Angie and I bounce off each other very well.
And you figure it out. And what I've done too is like with your community, when you have a community that's intensely passionate about something, I tell people that, yes, I'm the Octo King, I'm the founder of Octonation, but I by no means feel like I have all the answers, or that I should have all the answers. I tell people that when you have a community as big as Octonation, all you're doing is facilitating conversations on a daily basis with your community. And then once you get the information from them, then you give it back to them in the way that they understand it. So if octopuses, can edit their RNA, I would ask my community, hey, what do you think about this concept? And how would you explain this to a 5-year-old? And then when I get all the answers, these community, driven answers, then I start marketing it back to the community as a whole, with the best answers that they can give me. And so it's very much utilizing, there's hundreds of thousands of people that care about this animal. Why not, ask them what they think, and ask them for inspiration, and ask them for their creativity. We have so many artists that create on a daily basis. I just posted the other day this huge mural that somebody did in Florida, and he messaged me and he said, I can now check that off my bucket list. And I was like, what? He's like, getting shared on Octonation. He was like, I've been trying to do that for 3 years straight. And I was like, you could have just messaged me. He's just like, it's such an honor. And I was just like, I'm glad you think that. And I was like, I'm honored that it's an honor to you. It's just, so we have a really good positive community.
No, they are. I mean, what was the one you posted a couple weeks ago with the ink pen drawing? I was just, my jaw hit the ground. I saw that. I was just so creative. I love artists.
So, I know. I'm like, how do they see this?
I know. It's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit to one of the questions I gave you. And it was, from what you've learned doing this, what does the future look for cephalopods? And then a follow-up is, what's our future look for our oceans?
Mm-hmm. So for cephalopods, I believe that, even these past 3 years, I remember when I first started Octonation, it was very like this really strange, topic to talk about. It was, and people didn't really have that much to say about it. And as I have been bringing it up to like Uber drivers, and as I've been bringing it up to different people who I've just spoken to on a daily basis, they're having more and more knowledge about the animal, and not only just the octopus, but they sometimes know different species. And this is not a conversation that I could have had 3.5 years ago. So something is happening on social media, and Octonation obviously plays a big part in that, but that people are understanding, because, what most of your listeners probably don't know is that octopuses, the past, 100 years in Western, society or Western culture, were like a highly demonized animal in Hollywood, and then also just in culture. Like, they were always attacking something, or it's the Kraken, or, there's Ursula in Disney. They were like these weird, mysterious, sticky, gross creatures. And I reposition them as these magnificent, ancient, epic, superheroes. Yeah, incredible. These, superheroes. And people are like, wow, why are people afraid of these, these animals? And so the future of cephalopods look great. I mean, obviously with Octonation, we have a lot of great ideas in the works, like having Octovasion, like an Octocon or something like that. Octocon has already been taken, but having like a really cool convention where all of us can get together. Science Friday has a meetups called, I think it's where you can like watch cephalopod videos. They're doing them in like, I think like 10 cities. And there's a lot more events that are popping up, and a lot more organizations that are dedicating time and sometimes a week-long sessions on cephalopods and octopuses. And so I think it looks great for what people are doing. As far as the ocean is concerned, that's like a
I know.
I try to stay. Well, no, I do stay on the positive. And within Octonation, I obviously get a lot of negative people coming in, and we obviously ban them or block them, and just there's no space for that sort of. I'm only interested in people that have solutions and that aren't coming with these problems. So typically, I surround myself on a daily basis with thought leaders, organizations, brands that are empowering people to feel like not all is lost. Like, we don't have to move to Mars, that they're not, and so I stick around those organizations. Like the Lonely Whale Foundation is one that I follow. And they're the ones that are doing a lot of work around single-use plastics. And I mean, a lot of companies like Virgin Airlines. I mean, there's a lot of brands that are now jumping on Canada. I mean, just the other day, Justin Trudeau said by, what was it, 2021 that they were going to.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I stay on that front, and I try to turn my head away from organizations that just provide shock factor. I mean, I literally unfollow them and I block them, because you'll find that if you're an empath or you're a sensitive sort of person, I'm a very sensitive person. If you get it into your head, if you allow all these negative perceptions of what's going on in your head on a daily basis, for me, it's just, you would think that it would fire me up. But what I found is it disempowers me. It makes me check out. It makes me feel like all is lost. And so I work with organizations that are working towards solutions to fight what's going on right now. And that's what I would recommend some of your listeners to do. If there's just an organization where every single time they post something, you get knots in your stomach, then it's probably best that you shy away from that and towards an organization that's actively looking at things in a more positive way, and that is providing solutions to problems that are going on, not that it's just constantly trying to shock you. And an organization that wanted to partner with us a couple of years ago, when octopuses were being eaten live and in New York and in California, was PETA. And they wanted me to share a video that they made. And I said, unfortunately, your mission statement and our mission statement just don't go well together. So they're, animals are not ours to use for entertainment. What was it? Research, all these different things. And so they're anti-aquarium. And I mean, the Octonation would not exist today if I did not see an octopus at an aquarium when I was 7 years old. And so I can't have that stance. I don't know if there's a better way yet, because that's just not my experience, right? And
Right.
and what I'm doing is creating Octonation to where people don't need to have proximity, but I can tell you that me at 7, seeing that animal in person was absolutely life changing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Knowing that we share the planet with an animal is strange and amazing as the octopus is just something that catapulted me into this world of caring.
Right.
Yeah.
And we, you know, and I tell my own story as a young kid, you know, probably 7, walking around the San Diego Zoo and just enamored with all the animals. And here I am dedicating my life to animal science and the betterment, behavior, welfare. And now I have a podcast. I talk to thousands of people around the world. And yeah, I mean, that's an amazing point, but I want to get back to the ocean because you make such a powerful statement there. I know there's a couple Instagram accounts I need to drop today. It's so true that
I mean, it's just, you know, and I would say as a kid, I was sort of apathetic about the ocean growing up in San Antonio, Texas. I didn't understand, you know, I had never had teachers that truly instilled in me why I should really care. It was just like, you should just care. You should care. Everyone should care about the oceans. It wasn't only until I found my connection to it that I was just like, I want to protect this thing in it. And that needs to be okay for other people to realize, is that you really need to present a lot of cool things that live in the ocean. You have to present, educate. It's not just, well, you should just care. It's, what are you doing on a daily basis as an organization, or as if you're putting out information out there to inspire people, to get them interested, to help them understand, you know, how important it is, and in a way that they understand. So it's you know, it was important for me when I created Octonation, where it was just like, I need to get to this point where people are happy. They're excited to learn more. They're telling their kids, they're, you know, showing up, you know, how can we get them to a point where they're not coming out of this is awful, angry, and they're showing up with pitchforks? And how can I get them showing up and really, and really being like, we're here because we love this animal, and this is coming from a place of love and not pitchforks and reactionary and throwing paint on people and having crazy, you know, protests that are violent. Like, I don't feel like that's where change happens, you know?
No, you know, and then I want to go back to what you mentioned about the oceans, and yeah, the oceans are not doing well, but talk about conservation optimism. Just think about this, Warren. A couple years ago, we weren't talking about single-use plastics as much as we are today.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't having countries like down in New Zealand when I was living there for a while, or Canada, Europe, even here in the United States, we're seeing tremendous change. So there is a lot of optimism out there. We are changing, and it's because of our listeners, your fans, people voting with their dollars, people standing up for, hey, we need to protect our ocean.
And,
so there is a lot of good stuff going on.
We can hold a lot more people accountable on social media. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, because there are so much different attention graphs, meaning there are so many different screens that people can look at and choose what they watch on a daily basis and what they buy, you know, who they buy from. You know, it's easier today more than ever to start a business and things like that, where if you aren't supporting what the people believe in strongly, then you become irrelevant in the marketplace. And, you know, me, you know, having not just worked with Octonation, but working with a lot of other communities, I would say that I specifically work with purpose-driven brands. So brands that have a higher purpose. You know, I can't work with, you know, like a brand that just sells like a lipstick, you know, and it's just like, oh, you know, so I need to know the overarching, like, how are you actually impacting the planet? How are you raising people's consciousness levels? Those are the people and the brands that I work with. And I would say that you really have to respect and also educate people on a daily basis to help them make decisions. And that's what people are doing.
So a few more questions. I know you're extremely busy. So what's the future of Octonation? You know, where are you? I said bus, but really should be submarine. Where are you driving the submarine? We have like a multi-pronged approach to this. So obviously a lot more in-person events.
There are a lot of initiatives that we want to start in school. So in elementary school, like reading, having teachers read more octopus books to kids, seeing if we can get into the school system and kind of start them young and get them interested in the animal,
right.
and then provide an opportunity, like maybe a subscription box club where we're sending them like a stuffed animal of a different species and then teaching about that species to them, and starting them young on being stewards of the ocean. Basically everything that I want, I wish I would have had as a kid growing up, to be fascinated with, to make me feel like I was connected to something that was bigger than myself, is really what I want to start with Octonation. So a lot of education of the youth. And then for the adults, because you can't forget about them, they're intensely passionate too, is, again, what I've heard more than anything from our members is we want more in-person events. We want more meetups. We want more. There's a group of people, because we have a lot of scuba divers, that are like, we want to go on excursions together, so we can see what's happening in the reef firsthand. And so there's just a lot of different things. And then apart from that, obviously, collaborations with other organizations. We just did a fundraiser. We were one of the ones that Facebook chose to pilot test a new feature called their giving funds, which is you can fundraise for a cause and not just a specific organization. So Octonation chose, the Coral Reef Alliance, chose Ocean Conservancy, chose the Lonely Whale Foundation to do a fundraiser for. And so us partnering with other organizations and having them talk more about the octopus in order to really get their members passionate about the ocean, or not just be passionate about one thing, but be multi-passionate about what's going on in the ocean. I believe that once you do that, and they have like more interests, then people want to change more. They want to educate their friends more. They have more talking points. They're just more educated in which to talk to their friends and their family about the things that they care about. And I feel like it's our responsibility as an organization, if we're taking money, if we're taking donations from people, that we make sure that when we take a donation, that we're instilling that much confidence back in people, and then also more education, so that they, when they give their money to us, they know that they can leave with education that they can use to talk to their friends and their family. That isn't, just sitting out on the street corner and yelling at people as they walk by about giving money. And it's just, there's just so many ways that I'm just like, this is so antiquated. Yeah. Like,
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, there's such
a, I know, but it's changing. Things are changing.
Things are changing. And I mean, I'm glad that I had the life path that I had as far as going to the fashion industry and seeing firsthand how brands are making cloth relevant. And I was just like, oh, this is genius how this works, how brands are created based on who they work with and who they cater to. And so I use that same knowledge on a daily basis with Octonation, just making sure that when we have a conversation with people, or that when we partner or collaborate with somebody, that they're catering to an audience that has the headspace to talk about this subject. Because those super fans, or those people that are passionate, at least initially, they're going to be the ones that go out into their community and start talking about the subject. So it's really being smart about that, and not kind of blindly yelling at people,
Yeah, I know. It doesn't work. It doesn't
really
work. It doesn't work. Not in today's day and age. So I got a question, and I don't know if you want to admit this to the fan club, but do you have a favorite octopus or cephalopod?
Yeah. So probably the ones that I interact with the most, the giant Pacific octopuses, they are glorious. I've been to different.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've been to different aquariums, and it's just so cool that they can remember, who their keepers are, or who, the people that they like are and who they don't like are. It's just crazy when you cause when you see, this person really knows who I am and knows what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, they know who you are. It's just insane. And sometimes depending if they like you or not, they'll flush red and come up to the top and start trying to grab your arms. I mean, there's just been so many experiences that I've had.
Come swim with me.
I mean, they have 8 arms too. So, I mean, it's just like, so one time I was playing with one and we had like this, like bucket of food off to the back right. And it's like one of its back arms went and grabbed the food and like brought it under while like we were distracted playing with one of them. So it was just like,
they're so
yeah,
smart.
it's just like,
they're so crazy. Oh
yeah. It's seeing all of that happen. It's just like, this is insane. It's like if more people knew, and that's why Octonation, it's just like we inspire conservation of the ocean by teaching the world about octopuses. So we do that on a daily basis. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So 2 more questions. This one, I asked this of all my guests because I like to get all the different opinions and approaches to this question. So from your opinion, here you are, the largest octopus fan club in the world. You've lived, breathed this for 4 years. Do we have a moral obligation as a species to help cephalopods and all the other animals that are on Earth?
Yes, I believe we do. Because what I found with people that follow Octonation is that just the capacity to have love for something other than yourself or your fellow human, what I've found is it just results in better people, to have this empathy, to have a capacity to care about something other than, the people who are in direct, relation to your family or who you are. It just opens you up to being more giving, more nurturing, happier. If you look in Octonation, you can tell. I mean, we receive hundreds of comments a day from these people that are positive that, and what I found is the people that are drawn to this animal in a like a really cool way are people that are just, they're brilliant. I mean, I might be biased because it's my community, but, I mean, that's just it. I feel like it just makes you a better human being if you have that capacity to care about something other than yourself. So to remove yourself from your ego and to say, I care about these things that are going on in the world, just makes you a better human being. And it's better for the environment.
That's amazing.
I mean, we share this world with a lot of other things that we're actually dependent on. I know that some people don't necessarily think that because we've never been in a situation where we haven't had that, and so now we're struggling. But we're dependent on other species, and
right.
And to not think that, it means that you haven't removed yourself from your ego, which means you don't have that capacity to think about anything other than what's going on in your daily life, which means that's not good for the planet. I mean, that's never been good for people just to care about them and the people that are around them. That's not how communities and tribes, last, is by just caring about them. So I would say that's my answer for that one.
No, it's good. That's a deep one. It's great. Now that was really good. Very philosophical too. It really makes you think. Final question. So where can our listeners find Octonation and how can we help you in your efforts?
So Octonation, I mean, if you just go to Facebook, you type in Octopus or Octonation, you can follow our Facebook group. You can go to octopusmagic.com if you want to go to the Facebook group. On Instagram, you can search Octonation. If you want to get involved, we are about to launch a membership program that will give you discounts on different aquariums. There'll be a lot of perks for Octonation members. You can get involved with that. Just stay tuned. If you follow Octonation on any of our platforms, you'll hear about it coming up pretty soon. But with that, what we plan to do is to start funding some of the program ideas that we have, such as getting more octopus books into the schools so that they can be read to the kids, and connecting parents with resources in order for them to nurture this newfound love for this animal. You have a lot of parents that are like, oh, my kids really have they really love the dog, they really love their pets, And so for me, it's just like, how can we get them to fall in love with something that's outside of their reach and continue that fascination, or, online. And so, helping us by joining our membership will further those programs along, and we can all help each other out. Together with that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I'll put the links on our website and of course through our social media. But Warren, thank you. I know you're extremely busy, and I've been wanting to do this interview for months since you and I first started talking. And I just thank you for spending an hour with us. Go Octonation. I'm a huge fan of yours. Huge fan of the club, and I will be at that meetup at the Aquarium of the Pacific, right? That's the one in Long Beach, so I will be there. Yeah, I will be there. So thank you.
And we're just getting started. So that's what every single time somebody tells me, "Wow, you were just featured by Ellen," or "Wow, you were just featured by whatever." I was like, "We are just getting started." We have a lot of really cool stuff to do together. So I'm pumped. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Warren.